All right. So far, we have strictly been working with looking at the create tool. We have been working really with sketches, basic extrusion, revolves, that sort of thing. Tonight, what we're going to start working with is forms, form editing. So the difference with this would be that so far we have been working with sketch-based or sketch-modified objects. And what those become is they're very dimensionally based. Like literally, you are working from dimensions, be it a direct two-dimensional sketch, extruding that three-dimensionally and creating boxy forms that you can then round edges and things like that. Form editing is more like sculpting with a grid. So the form edit tool is here over the little pink eraser box with a starburst thingy on it. When you select this, just like everything else, it changes your toolbar. Now you see it seems like, oh, well, crap, it just simplified everything. Well, of course, there's going to be a whole pile of drop downs because what this is all about is you can create some basic forms, some basic bodies. Where the complexity comes in is the modify. That's where there's so much you can do with this. So we're going to start to scratch the surface with this tonight. So just to play around with some things, I want to show you just some basic forms. So I'm going to start with a sphere. Now I'm going to just plop it right in the center, right in the middle. Now when I start that, first off, usually you would think like a circle, it would just automatically lock to your cursor and you draw it out. Well, instead, what this does is it drops a sphere down, and you can use the slider or numeric or the numeric input to plop in actual dimensions. So I'll just put like 120. That doesn't mean anything because I'm scaling and everything. However, when I hit OK, oops, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to hit OK yet. Let me Control Z that and start over. So I'm going to drag this out to the same 120. Or we can do, there we go, 125. Cool. Now, you'll notice in the toolbox and the slider, and there's also on the sphere itself, there's different sliders. What this does, and the reason I start with the sphere, is this will basically create more longitudinal and latitudinal segments. This will create more faces. That's what each of these little segments are called, faces. I can either change them numerically on the toolbar, or I can use the slider. And Cynthia, I had just muted yours. I was getting some feedback on yours, so I'll unmute it if you would. Oh, whoops. I guess you have to mute it from here on. Never mind. So if I grab and hold this slider, you'll see this now changes the number of faces. Now, that's way too many to deal with, but you can change the complexity of these forms on the fly. So I'm going to turn this down to like 4. And that now makes it more, if I'm looking from the straight down, now I have more of like a grid pattern. But if you look more closely, you'll see the problem with that is this is no longer a sphere. This is more like a mushed sphere. You see how over on this top right-hand quadrant here, that's not a good curve. So if I go back to where it was, 8 and 8, you see how much more rounded that became. Now, of course, it's not perfectly round. If you zoom way in, you can see that it's made up of straight lines, and that's how computers create rounded forms. But that's how that works. And you'll see in here, you can apply symmetry to this, mirrored or circular. And operations, now for now, standard new body. If this was intersecting another thing, a join, your standard combination tools would come up, be it join, intersect, or delete, or cut rather. So that's what those are. So symmetry, I can add that afterwards too. So I'll just start from there. Okay. Now I have this form. Now when I mouse over each of these faces, it highlights. I can select there, do all kinds of stuff. Now, the real thing is going to be edit form tool. I mouse over at the top. It's this little like sheet of paper looking thing with the 3 arrows coming from a circle form or a cursor. Select that. This now will let me, it enters the edit form tool, and this now will let me play around with these surfaces. Now, one thing I want you to note, if you look down at the bottom left hand of your of your toolbar, time slider, there we are, it is not adding more icons to this. So this is a drawback of the edit form feature. You are editing a singular form, not adding additional modifiers to it. So down the line, if I put like extrusions through this or cut into it or added intersecting elements, those would create more icons in the time slider. But anything I do to this form is solely within this one edit form tool. So keep that in mind when you're working with stuff. In other words, you can't go back in time with these aside from your Control or Command Z, your backup undos. Same thing with redoing. The only way to, if you were to say you wanted to edit this form, finish, save, come back after lunch and work on it some more, that's gone now. You really, unfortunately, you have to, or rather, at least to where you could go back and play with adjust what you just did. So the only thing you can do in edit form is continue to edit that from your last point. Does that make sense? You cannot go back in time aside from undo. That's a big problem with this. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you, let's walk through the toolbox. So your edit form, obviously, it's that. Now, this is what's called a T-spline. And what that is just like before when you're drawing curved splines, it was a fit point spline in your sketch mode. So it was drawing a curved line between points. This works more like a net. If you've ever seen, just like literally a net, you can grab sections between a net, the string between knots. You can grab the points where the knots intersect. That's the same thing here. You have transform mode, multi, translation. These will make more sense in a bit. You don't have to actually make any alterations to any of these selections. But you do want to take note of the selection filter, this third or fourth section down. Right now, the default is all. So I can select a face, I can select a line, or I can select a point. Let me zoom in here and you can see more clearly. When I do any of that, you'll see a few additional things come up to your selection gimbal. One of them is that you can now move in every dimension, both XY, XZ, and YZ. Lots of options here. If you select a point, if you mouse over directly, you'll see there's additional one where it's hard to see it if I mouse over, but there are 3 little arrows come out from right there. That is a scale tool for everything. It's a 3-dimensional scale. Unlike whereas here on your selection bar, any axis is going to have your free transform, which is a square in the center. The line horizontal or line vertical is your non-uniform scale for that dimension. And then the curve at the end is the uniform scale for that dimension. And I'll show you what I mean for that in a minute. Okay, let's grab some faces. So I can grab a face here. I could grab a couple of faces by holding down Control and selecting a few of these. Now it'll interact with all of that. If I grab one of the arrows and slide it, now it's going to warp this whole thing. I can extrude this on the fly by, before I grab the arrow again, press and hold Alt. Now click the, Now click that arrow, and that extrudes. I can do it each time. Release Alt, press again, hold and pull down. I'm going to keep extruding. Now what I can do is, and I could have done before too, that vertex looking thing, if I grab that and I can slide this around, that is the uniform scale. And it's a value system, just like before. I can scale it down just by dragging and pulling the mouse down. I let go. Now I can press and hold Alt, do it again. You can translate this in other directions. I can pull this left, right, up, down. I can grab the non-uniform and move it all around. It acts all like a fit point spline, but a three-dimensional one. I can also use the rotate gimbals. Those are the arcs floating outside. I can rotate that up and down. Obviously, you go too far and it folds in on itself. That creates problems. So you can keep doing stuff like that. I could also grab lines. If I scale that up and down, it shrinks it around. I can grab one of the lines and actually pull that outward. I can, if I double click on one line, it selects that whole circle line there, or that whole orbit. Now, if I scale that out, now it scales the whole surrounding circle there. Okay, made some weird stuff there. Neato. What if I'd wanted to do that to all sides? Well, you can't go back in time on this, so I'll hit OK, finish form. I'm going to start a new one. New form, that hides. Let me expand the body's toolbar out. For some reason, it's not doing it. I'm going to do the same. Sphere, smack in the middle. We'll do it. I'll do it again to like, yeah, that's cool. We'll make 150. I like the amount of numbers there, or the amount of face segments. Cool. Again, you can select symmetry right here and create it right from the get-go. Select no new body. Why is it hiding the original one? That's odd. Anyhow, you can also create symmetry after the fact. So I'm going to zoom to the top, or I'm going to just go to this top viewpoint, and the middle section here at the top toolbar, symmetry. Now, if I click the expand button, you can see all the other options. Yeah, I have symmetry, standard, bisected symmetry. If you select that, how this works is you select a face on one side, and then if you select a face anywhere else, it will create a symmetry line, and that's delineated by, see this line here, this diagonal top left going down to bottom right, that has now turned green. If I orbit around, you can see a little more clearly. Now, anything I do on one side of that line will be mirrored onto the other. Or, let me cancel and use the circular symmetry. I go back up to the top again. Select one. Now, others have started up options. What this is showing you is if I select this red one, it's going to be symmetrical across two, meaning it will be basically you just recreated two-sided symmetry. If I select the red one, or this orange one here, that's going to create four symmetrical elements. So crisscross. Select this one here that's exactly next to my original selection. It's going to assume I want all 8 segments to be symmetrical. Not bad. I'll go with this one, 4. Select there. Why isn't it letting me select it? Drop down, number 4. For some reason it's not selecting it, but okay. So now anything I do to one, it will do across all 4 of these. So let's go to modify and extrude. So I can just drag this out first. I didn't do it. Oh, for some reason it didn't select it. Well, that's just weird. Ugh. There we are. Not sure why it did that. Why is it not letting me select that? Not sure why it was doing that before. So if I drag this out, what the hell? For some reason, it's not doing it. Tell you what. Let me finish that. And I wonder if it's just because it's showing both of those. Let me hide that one. Go back to that one. Might be because it was trying to select multiples. Very strange. Anyhow, select a symmetry. Just trying to make sure it's... What the hell's going on here? All right. I don't know what's going on. I think there's something wrong with the program at the moment. So let me go back. I'll finish this form. All right, fine. We'll just start over with you. And I'll apply the symmetry right from the get-go. Do it again, 150. So symmetry on the toolbox of my initial startup. I'll do circular symmetry. There we go. That's what it was supposed to have been doing. And now you can also select symmetrical faces. Do I want 1? Let's do 4. Now when I make that change, oh, geez, that is not it at all. So you see now that there are symmetry lines going all across this sphere. Operation still fine. One body. We're good. Okay. That was very strange. Now when I select this line, if I drag outward, well, now it's going to do some weird stuff because they're all interconnected. So I'm going to Control Z that, and instead I'm going to use the Alt extrusion. So press down Alt, hold it, slider bar out. Now it's selecting all of these going outward in all dimensions. And again, the reason it's doing that is for some reason it wasn't applying symmetry before. It should have been doing it. I only wanted to select 4 of them, but there we are. So you can start getting some pretty interesting stuff going on. I'm rotating this. I'm going to select that. Oop, I didn't want to scale it. I wanted to select the translate there. I will press and hold Alt, drag that out again. Let's scale that down. Rotate that a little bit. Now let's select multiple areas and we'll drag that outward with an Alt extrusion again. Oops. Will warn you, a lot of times it does get difficult to select this, what you're actually wanting to out of this gimbal. So you can start to do some pretty funky stuff with your symmetries and such. And this is why the toolbar selection is so slight, while the modifiers are many. You can do a lot. So I can start selecting other stuff, and I can keep dragging it up and out. And now I've started just doing all kinds of nannery. All right, so this is starting to get pretty complex. You wanted to keep working with this, but one, maybe your computer is slowing down because it's really trying to calculate all of these changes on the fly. Maybe it's starting to get complex, and it's just kind of hard to see what you're doing. So I'm going to finish editing form here. Now, I have not finished the form itself. Just like when you're working with sketches and anything else, I haven't finished that, but I just finished that immediate edit tool. I'm going to go to Utilities, and this is the default button up here. And you see when I mouse over the display mode, it changes between smooth, boxy, or somewhere in between, where it shows both. It superimposes the box frame and the and your actual form. So I'm going to select this. I want the whole thing. And now I'm going to play with different modes. So if I select box mode, it kind of turned the whole thing kind of crystalline. What that's doing is it hasn't actually made an alteration to your project. What it's doing is it's simply changing the views so that if you wanted to get more complex, This simplifies your form to where you can more easily work with it, and then you just change the view back to smooth, and it will recalculate everything. So this just helps save some computing power. You could do both with the control frame selected, so it's a little bit easier to grab sections. See, now I just have a box face moved highlighted over rather than trying to get the rounded face. So let me just go to box display, and I'll show you what I mean by that now. All right, so now I can modify these a little more easily. So I can grab like a point, go back to edit feature. Now I can drag these out a bit. Again, I can extrude faces, but you see how now if I make alterations to all of this, oops, now it won't be as difficult for the thing to compute, and I can see what the hell I'm doing. So let's see here. Let's just grab a couple of these, and we'll just grab the whole bottom. So I'll do a select all by clicking and dragging from the right and selecting left. Just those bottom halves. Now I can drag this whole thing down. I can make some extrusions. It simply makes this a little bit easier to see what you're doing. I'm just playing with the different features. Now, if I grab one of those, it's going to do it to all of them again. That's fine. Drag that down, whatever have you. Okay, so I was just playing with it, just showing some different modifications. Now, if I go back to display mode and go back to smooth, now it's just changed it back. It's just a little bit easier to see what you're doing. That's the feature of that. So, all right, we're getting all kinds of crazy symmetry and everything. What do you do with this? Now, there's a bunch of other modifiers. We're going to get to some of them tonight. And this is why I was saying I'm going to record another session that you could view on your own time to just go through a couple of the other of these modifiers. So let's get to the actual project I want you to work on for homework. So finish form, coincident vertexes. That's because I drew those points out too far. It made some problems. Failed to convert. Project, display in parametric workspace. Okay, that's fine. Continue. If it goes nanners, whatever. All right, yeah. Fine. Yeah, I got it. Go back. All right, fine, whatever. Doesn't matter. Not going to save it anyway. Don't save. Just wanted to show you a few things. So what I do want to show you tonight, and I'll open up the examples again here. Surface modeling. We're going to make a spoon. Or if you're a fan of the tick, spoon. Sorry if that was in your ears. So this is created from a surface modeling, or from surface modeling rather, and this is created from multiple bodies. So I'll walk you through how it did this. Start a new project, and as I said, start by saving. Spoon class walkthrough. Now Fusion will more effectively save what you're doing. So a few things. You know what a spoon looks like, but it doesn't hurt to drop in a canvas so you can just have an example. Let's see here. I had saved a image of the spoon literally earlier. So cool. Drop the canvas down. Let's scale this up. Oops, not what I wanted to grab. No, go back to 0. Great. Plop it back over there. That's all right. I'll play with it some more in a bit. You know what? I'm never going to get it back where I wanted it to be. Just redo it. Fine. I was trying to grab the scale button there. All right. So remember that each of these blocks is 1 millimeter. So a spoon, and I got a measurement here for myself, is about 160. So cool. Now, this gets a little tricky to scale things to what you want. So I'm just going to, instead, I'll hit OK. I can always go back and modify that. So if I want, I'm going to just make a line from there. And let's see, 160. Clearly much larger. So I'll drag that line back. Oops. Where are you? There we go. Drag that back in place and about in the middle. Cool. Now I can go back to my canvas and scale that properly. Problem is what I should have done was made that line beforehand. All right, so always look into your order of operations. Sorry, brain farts out there. All right, and frankly, for this, close enough is close enough. Okay, so we got a spoon, looking straight down, got an image of a spoon. Everybody's happy, or at least I am. So let's start with form editing. Create a form. Now, there's a few approaches you can take here. I'm going to show you one, and then I'm going to show you a different one. So one of the things you can do is start by making just a flat plane and manipulating that. So I'm going to use the plane tool. What this does is it creates, like it says, literally a flat plane, a rectangle, just like the sketch tool, only you can then set the amount of faces it has. So I'm going to start. You can always use your selection tools. Center point, yeah, just like with drawing sketches before. Select in the center. I can draw just like we did before, kind of like treat this like a bounding box. So yeah, 188, that's about as big as it was. And 36 seems about right. The picture isn't perfectly symmetrical. Now you got your sliders again. I can grab here, add multiple segments up and down. I could grab left and right, add multiple segments that way. I don't want that many. Honestly, the 2 is perfectly fine because that creates symmetry. And with that, you can build in symmetry directly to that. Select one, select the other. You have a dotted line right in between. If I wanted, I could add that later, but I'll just leave it in for now. The selection there is length symmetry. When you select that, if I zoom in close, you can see that center line is just a line like anything else. If I select length symmetry, that becomes a dotted line, just like a construction line, because what that's showing is now it's green. It's showing that's the symmetry. Across that line, one side will do to the other. Cool, operation is good. Hooray. Now we have a singular plane to work from. I'm going to keep working from the top just because that is the most sensible region. Edit form. I honestly like to work by selecting vertexes. When I drag in, you see it starts to tweak everything. Drag that one. I can start building stuff in. Drag out there. Similar. Now, what happens if it's like, oh, crap, you know what? I should have made this longer. Or for that matter, all right, let's drag this whole section. Nope. I wanted to move, not scale it. And then I keep adding. You can select a line, drag that in, that point. Damn, I should have added more sections. No problem. You could extrude just like before. Select the line, press and hold Alt. Now drag, and it drags the whole to-do. Now the problem is you didn't select that point, or I didn't. So I'm going to Control-Z that, and I'm going to use the selection tool from the left to the right. So select only what's in there. But that grabbed both that vertex and the line. Click and hold Alt. Why isn't it weird? It's doing some weird stuff tonight. That was more than I wanted, but whatever. Gets me closer. Move the point. I like that. Select those. Drag it in. It keeps selecting the scale. That's the problem. I wonder if it's doing... Oh, that's why. See, I was accidentally grabbing that scale tool instead of the actual arrow. So like I said, be cautious with your lines. Now, can you delete lines once you've created them? No. So be cautious with that. You can always Control Z stuff. Oops, I wanted to zoom out to the whole thing. So again, I am tweaking these lines just to try to get them closer to where I want them. Now, the drawback here, of course, is that you're really kind of locked into what you have. And that's not a bad thing. You can add in, say, now I can select this point here, tumble down. Because remember, you can work in 3 dimensions, drag that point and pull that spoon downward, pull that bowl downward. And that works plenty fine. You can tweak these also. I can select, oops, not from the right, but from the left. I can select those vertices rather. But in the toolbox, I can also isolate. So far I've had the selection filter to all. If I select vertexes, now it just highlights just the vertexes. So if I grab both of those, now I can pull those downward and I can tweak this a little bit more. Grab all those, drag it up, try to play a bit more with an actual like spoon profile. There we go. So that starts to work pretty well. Grab that one. I'm gonna, oops, orbit around here, and I'm gonna try and smooth that out a little bit just by grabbing the free transform one selector, move that in a little bit. Problem with a lot of these is you kind of start to lose where you're working. So I can grab a lot of these. Maybe now I'll just grab the lines. I can't grab the lines now because I have the vertex selections filter on. Select lines. Now I can only select lines. And I'm just going to drag that just a little bit out further. Back to vertex. That one. Getting closer. Let me grab all 3 of those. Drag that forward a little bit. Okay. That's closer-ish. Obviously, I would need more lines. I would need more lines here. Well, all right. Well, that would be a problem in a minute, and we'll talk about that. But right now, I just want to show you what happens with here. Now, again, I have not clicked Finish Form. What I'm going to do to add dimension to this is I'm going to use the Thicken tool. And what that is literally it thickens what you're working with. That's under the modifier. Down here, Thicken. I added that to my toolbar by mousing over the 3 dots to toolbar. You can also add it to your shortcuts, because remember, if you can't find something, press S as in September, brings up your shortcut bar. Now it's there. Or if you couldn't find it before, start typing in Thicken. Brings it up. Hooray. Select this whole thing. Now you see this weird box coming up. That is just like before with just altering the views. That's all it's doing. I'm going to leave it at, 2 millimeters thickness. Sounds good. You can keep it sharp, so it's basically treating it more like an extrude. Soft, makes it soft round edges. No edge, basically just it's basically using the Thicken tool as an offset tool. It will be 2 planes floating apart from one another. That is useful if you are creating custom edges or that sort of thing. For right now, I'm just going to use soft, select OK. Now it has made a rather soft looking spoon kind of thing. Now, again, this is far from exactly what I need, but it's getting close. I can continue to manipulate this now that this actually has dimension, meaning that I could say, let's select all the back here, and I want to go back and edit form. I would like to add some thickness to this. So I will grab the scale tool and blow that up a little bit. You could select the face. I'm going to do a couple here. Use the Alt extrusion tool, press and hold Alt, use the arrow key. Now it's got wings of some sort. I can scale that down, It's very hard to grab the scale tool sometimes. Yeah, not what I wanted. Let's just grab the uniform one. There we go. Zoom those down, whatever. So it's like the airplane spoon. Okay, that's one way of doing this. This doesn't really get me where I want to be. I don't like how how making the bowl works. I want to have a little more control with that. And I don't like that it just is such a smooth transition. I would like a bit of more control with that too. So I'm going to finish this form. And I'm going to do another one. Edit form or create form. Cool. Now I'm going to start just like before with other projects. Remember, you can combine you can combine different sketches and parts. Well, this I can combine different forms. So I'm going to start with a sphere on the flat plane, and I'm going to put it, it's a little bit difficult to see, so I'm going to put it right about there. I'm going to zoom outward or scale this up. That works well. Symmetry, yes, I want some symmetry on this, but I want mirrored symmetry. So I want length or width. It's hard to see because it converted this to a green, but if I zoom in, you can see, or rather if I tumble, you can see a little more clearly. That symmetry line is right across. That's what I want. It's going left to right. Good. Okay. Well, why the hell would I start with a sphere? Because first, I'm going to chop the thing apart. Select up there, press delete. That chopped it in half. Now I have an open bowl form. It's just a bowl. Cool. Now I can start to edit that form. And I can play around with these faces. First, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit, meaning I want to compress the bowl a little bit. So select those, move it a little more shallow. Problem with selecting by faces is you can start to get these crimp points. That's why I often like to select by vertexes. So I'm going to use the vertices, select from the right. Let's move everything. And see, this works like a fit point spline tool. So you got to be careful with this sometimes. This is a convenient way of working, but it does cause some problems. So let's let's select faces here. Go up, go up. Squashing it up. All right, now we're getting a little more bowl shaped. Select by vertex. Want to kind of slide all these forward a little bit. Now, let's drag. I'm going to go from the top and just start dragging stuff. So I'm just trying to get my shape kind of, well, spoon-like. We're getting there. Now it's kind of got a little bit too much of a bowl. And this is where you just kind of play with these vertexes or whatever you're working with. So we're getting a little more spoon-like. It's not perfect. I can play with it more in a bit. Okay. So now for the handle. Now I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of recreate what I already did. Select I'm going to create a plane, make a center point plane. Yeah, that works. Rectangle, something, something, roughly there. Okay. Now let's make this with a few more segments. 7. We'll start with 6 instead. That ought to do it. Mirrored symmetry across that line. Good. Okay. Now we go back to edit this form. Now we have a bit more control. We go back to all of them. Let's see. I'll just select all of that. And first, let's move that forward a little bit more. I want to shrink that. Nah, that's not a good way to work. Actually, I probably shouldn't have moved that one forward too far because I want that point right in the center of where that's going to be. I'm going to grab that vertex, bend it inward. This one, about to right there. Again, select that whole thing, move it forward. Now I'm going to show you how we're going to join these two together in a minute. But first, I want to keep tweaking this. Just moving these outward a little bit to better fit a spoon. Now remember, we can continue to edit this in a bit. So for right now, oops, I'm going to just grab some parts and move it around a little bit. Now remember, this has symmetry active. So it doesn't matter if I'm selecting on the bottom half of that symmetry line or the top. Same diff. It does not matter because it's going to augment on both. Cool. That's a bit better to my overlay. Still need to bring that line in a little bit. And realistically, probably could have done with one more segment line. That's all right. We'll tweak this in a few. Okay. Edit form. Looks pretty decent. That's about right on top of the spoon handle. We're good. Oops. Let's zoom back out so you can see what the hell I'm doing. All right. To join these two together, go to Modify, and what I want is bridge. It literally bridges across. I could merge these two, and that would snap between them, but I want a new set of pieces. I want a new set of elements to this. So I want a bridge, and that's why it's named that way. It joins across there without moving any other components, without moving any other bodies, rather. So select side one, make sure to grab both of those. And it's hard to see because of the auto color. Let me change this. There we are. That side has now turned yellow. Side two on your selection box, arrow key, select those two. And now it has given me this broken down bounding box again. You can see, just like I showed you before, the difference in the view display modes. That's all that's doing. You can add additional faces if you want. I don't need them. If you had a curve going between them, you could add that. Preview is there. Don't really have to worry about any of the other stuff. I don't want it to maintain any edge creases because I want it to be as smooth as possible. Select OK. Bloop. Now it has created a bridge between those. And I can still go back and edit that. Zoom in, go back to edit form. Now I have another line that I can work from. That's why I did it this way. I can tweak this a little bit, get a little closer to where I want it to be. Now this needs to be a bit thicker. So bring the handle out a little bit. Yeah, that looks not terrible. It looks like a spoon. Okay. Again, now the problem is you look to the right. All right, well, this clearly needs to be tweaked a bit. So let's go back and edit this. Well, most spoon bowls are going to be rotated a little bit, so let's tweak that a bit. Now let's, where are my lines? That's the only problem with working this way. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to see what you're doing. Select right there. Tell you what, we're going to switch to vertices because I don't want everything being selected. So drag upwards just a little bit. Go to the right again. In the center there, and we'll drag that up a bit more. Something to that effect. Drag all of these a little bit. All right, that just warped the whole thing. All right, that's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. I'll bring those down a bit. Okay. Recalculating. Thank you. All right. Now, your first thought would be, okay, now I want to finish this form. There is a thicken tool for general surfaces. We're still working within this same form. You're still editing basically that same set of forms. So before you do that, I want to use the thicken tool here. Select thicken, select this whole body, leave it at 2 millimeters, sure. Thicken type soft, normal, good. All right, now I have a different spoon. Looking at it from the right, same deal. All right, now I can press finish form. Now again, there's two things in there. First spoon, oh, sorry, it got it backwards. So that's my first spoon. I was showing you kind of screwing around with that. Second spoon, a little more control. Like I said, that's why I like working that way. Okay. So this is created from a sphere and a surface bridge between. Now I want to create, now I can add other features. You see here on the timeline down here, it's only showing those two complete forms, not showing all of the modifications and editing I did within that. So that's one of the major drawbacks of this, of working this way. But now let's make this into a Spark because it entertains me. So I'm going to create a sketch. Now we're merging ways we've been working. I just selected the bottom plane, and I'm going to start making teeth on here. So I'm going to select a center triangle. I'm going to start right from smack in the middle. And yeah, 2 millimeters wide. I forget how far in sporks go. Yeah, that works for me. Cool. I'm going to round that out. So I'm going to use a circle tool, select right in the middle. And it is 2 millimeters wide also because of the rest of that line. If this is confusing to see, hide everything. And for that matter, I can also hide the canvas. There we go. I'm going to use a trim tool just to zip a few chunks of that out. Cool. I just need that profile. The left side does not matter. Okay. Finish sketch. Unhide body. Oops. Both of them. There we are. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude that profile. Now, if I were to extrude this in one direction and do a cut, I would get some of the bowl, but not all of it. So rather than doing like 2 extrudes or anything like that, look at your toolbox, go to direction, not two-sided, but symmetric. Two-sided honestly would work fine also, but this, it just means that it's going to drag that extrusion up and down. And if I need to add more, there we are. But it's pulling it in both directions equally. And it's performing cut function. Perfect. That's what I want. Because I'm going to use the pattern tool to create multiple features. Again, yes, you technically could make multiple profiles that sketch profile, then extrude it. But if I wanted to add fillets or something into this, which I'm going to do, I would then have to go in and add each and every one of those on its own. But just like with the Revolve project, I can make my alterations here, and we'll do 0.25. Yeah, that's a pretty small amount. Fillet around that. So now it's a single, almost like a sandal going here. Now I've got that single feature in there. I go to create. Where we used the pattern tool before, we use circular pattern. Here I'm going to use rectangular pattern. So my objects are faces, or sorry, my selection type is faces. My objects, instead of selecting these individually, I'm going to use a from the left selection box, which only selects anything that is completely inside of the selection box. And that grabbed all of those faces, including the fillets. Cool. So now I get to go down here and select my directions and such. Direction type, yep. One direction, that's what it is. What direction do I want it to go in? Press the selection box there. go back to the origin, and I'm selecting the x-axis. So now I have sliders here. So yes, the sliders are for both directions, meaning rectangular can go in the x direction or the y, and also the y direction. I don't need it to go that way, but what I do want is to go multiples in the x direction. So I can select here, and I'm just clicking, holding that arrow and dragging it out. However, I need to go on both sides. So go back down to direction type. I want symmetric. Well, now it's making those 3 across. So it's 3 total versions. I want 5. There we go. We'll see what 4 does. 4 doesn't work because I started with the center one. I need, not 45. There we go. There we are. Now, what I get to do here is I get to play with the spacing, because right now I have the distance type selected as spacing. What that is it keeps the distance equidistant from each from one another. If I selected the extent, this is the selection where it will automatically position them to fill to the maximum distance away from the center that you want. That's what the difference of that is. That's the difference that there is. So play around with that sort of thing. All right. If I select OK, calculating and thinkifying. Hiya! Chopped more of the same feature. Just like we did for cutting the holes in the revolve tool, same thing here. Made multiples of the same feature, only I did it in a linear direction instead of in a circle. And there is a rather horrifying spork. So there you go. That's how you create a thickened utensil or a thickened item from flat surfaces. I'm going to save that. So your project, your homework is, I want you to create 3 different utensils. One could be a spork, one could be a flat fork, one could be a knife, something like that. So I want to go over something real quick. How might you create a knife? The thing about a knife would be, looking flat down, it's not symmetrical. Aha, but it is if you rotate it 90 degrees. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's start a new thing here. I'll hide this. And we'll just say it's the same length. Cool. So I can continue to use that line. So I'm going to create a form. I'm going to start with we'll start with a box. So with the spoon, I started looking at the front, or at the top down. I'm going to start from the side this time. So if I look from the left, if I create this box, let's go to about there. Now I can continue to stretch this, all of that. However, I also want to add some faces. So let's do that. Nope, not that way. I just want the 2 faces. Add them to there. Oh my God, way too many. Just a few extra. Cool. Symmetry, mirrored, yes. However, now I have, because before I was just working with a sphere, now I have something that technically has distinct 6 sides. So now I can play with height also, and that's where I want the symmetry. So I hit OK. Now if I zoom in, you see the dotted line is across, and let me go to modify and you can see it more clearly. It's across that line there. So now if I tweak this, say like I want to make this into a knife, and the reason I did this is for exactly this reason. Oops, I'm going to select from that way. I actually want the faces. Oh, that's why. Now, if I do the extrusion, click and hold Alt, drag that outward. Cool, we got that. I can do it again. I'm going to start scaling this down a little bit. Oh, other way. But what I want is this to be a bit sharper. Now, yeah, duh, it's more of a cucumber right now, but we'll get there. So I'm going to do it again, extrude outward. Okay. Now what I can do is from the top, now I can select, we'll do faces. Yeah. Okay. A little bit easier to select this way. Cool. So I've got those faces here. All right, I guess it's more of a thermometer at this point. But if I drag it inward, now I can start creating a blade of like a butter knife here. And again, you can tweak this some more. You know, again, keep playing with your like points here. Grab all of those, drag that upward. Obviously, all of these needs to be a bit sharper. I can rotate that a bit. But all I'm doing basically is just looking at it in a different direction. So again, yeah, sure. Starting to play with where this handle might go. Obviously, I'm just freehanding this, and this is turning into definitely much more of a thermometer than a knife. But you get the idea. So look at it in those terms, and you can still play with your symmetries. You're just making the faces much closer together. And then obviously you can add features to this all over the place. But looking at it from the top down, yeah, now I got more of like a butter knife thing going. Albeit a really terrible one. And I'll rename that. Okay. And one of the other major things is let's move these damn things around. Selected the body from the actual hierarchy tree. Click and drag with the move tool. Okay. Spork. Let's move you out of the way. Okay. So now I have my cutlery family of nightmares. And again, obviously, you could separate these out to components or appearances, bring up some appearances as soon as it actually does. And, yep, you can make some. We'll make that one chrome. We'll make that one bronze. Now the problem is these are all different. Did I change one and not the other? Oh, I just accidentally dropped the material onto both of them. That's all. And we'll make a terrible lead knife because why not? And there you have it. Surface editing features to create some terrible cutlery. So again, your homework is to make 3 separate utensils using surface edit tools in whatever manner you see fit. So that'll do it for this project, or at least the instructions for this one.